when I went to high school, I had no choice but to fulfill my obligation as a good Sri Lankan boy. And I was like, I'm going to prepare to become an electrical engineer. And those of you with South Asian parents, you have 3 job options, right? Engineer, doctor, lawyer, right? So I was like, all right, engineer, let's do this. So I was taking classes in computer science, and what was tough for me when I was growing up is, as a kid, when I was much younger, teachers didn't really like me very much. Like, they thought that I talked way too much. Apparently, I still do that. When I got older, they just thought I was too difficult. And I remember one of my computer science classes where I felt like that really came to a head. So one of my computer science teachers, he's outlining one of his lessons for the day, and I kind of raised my hand. I'm like, hey, got some issues with this. This doesn't really make sense. I wasn't trying to be difficult. I wasn't trying to show out or be a class clown. I was just like, hey, I think there might be a better way to do this. And the way that he responds to me, it's basically in front of the entire class. It's not even acknowledging the suggestion that I just gave him. He just says, your song and dance is not going to cut it in college. It's like, okay, my song and dance is not going to cut it in college. So you're basically projecting my failure as a high schooler. And that was kind of weird. I didn't really understand that. And I thought about it more and more. Remember, this is a computer science teacher, so there's code in what he says, literally and figuratively. Right? And I'm thinking about, what is this code that he's trying to get across to me? Part of it is probably because, all right, he's like, this guy's a troublemaker. He's disrupting the established order in this class. I think it was more about the status quo. And there was a certain status quo that he was comfortable with. And it may be ineffective, but he's still comfortable with that status quo. And so anybody who challenges that status quo and that playing field that he was so comfortable with must be an enemy of the state and must be somebody who is destined for failure. So that's the mentality of the protectors of the status quo. And to all the leaders here in this room, we're going to meet those protectors of the status quo more and more in our lives on a day-to-day, month-to-month, year-to-year basis. These folks, they're invested in a certain way of doing things, in a certain set of rules. And so therefore, it's going to take a new set of rules, so troublemaker rules, for us to be able to completely change the game and for us to rewrite the way things are done and for us to actually level these incredibly uneven playing fields in so many different areas. So I want to take a closer look at that playing field. So a lot of you might have taken the 2017 Global Shapers Survey. And thousands of people, thousands of young emerging leaders expressing, here are the issues that matter to us. And number one, by far, on that survey was climate change. So I'm from the United States, right? So I want to share a little bit about some of these different issues within the context of what's happening in the U.S. Some of you might be aware that we have a pretty unique presidential administration right now. They do things a little differently. So in the past 2 years, I want to show you guys a comprehensive list of everything this presidential administration has done to protect the planet. Now, let's be clear. It's not that they haven't taken action. They've taken action, all right? They've taken action to reduce rules on coal power plants so that they can go ahead and pollute the environment even more. They've taken action to reduce fuel economy standards. They've taken that action. They've taken action to reduce funding for climate change research and carbon emissions and renewable energy. So they've taken that action. That's happening. So that issue you said is number one around the world. You have an administration in the US that is fighting against that is actively fighting against it. And they're trying to fortify the very status quo that you are trying to take apart. All right, so that's issue number one. The second issue you called out was wide-scale conflict and war. So in the US, so conflict and war, it takes shape in a lot of different forms. In the US, we have less than 5% of the global population. We have more than 31% of the world's mass shooters, which is out of control. You are 25.2 times more likely to be killed by a gun in the US than other high-income countries. So there's a problem, right? There's something that needs to be done. And now we acknowledge there's something that needs to be done. So over the past 10 years, here's everything that has happened at a federal level. That's what's happened in the past 10 years. And people are frustrated with this epidemic. They're angry. They're scared, they're disappointed. But what's just asinine to me is that more and more people, maybe not more and more, but there are people who are out there who are doubling down on guns, or the right to bear arms, as you might call it, as it's said in the Constitution. There's this law in the US called Stand Your Ground. And a very simple way of putting it, stand your ground, is that if I feel threatened by you, I can shoot you. That's pretty much what it comes down to. Like, don't let anybody else tell you what stand your ground is about and all these different loopholes. No, basically, if I feel threatened in some shape or form, it doesn't matter what that threat is, I can shoot you. So it's absolutely ridiculous. And by the way, it's also an incredibly racist law because it tends to favor white people significantly more than it helps people of color.